Empaths often find themselves caught in a silent storm, drawn to those who mirror their wounds rather than their worth. They believe that by loving deeply enough, they can heal the brokenness in another. It's a noble illusion, born not from weakness, but from a profound capacity to feel. Yet this same gift becomes their greatest vulnerability when it's poured into someone who only knows how to take. The narcissist feeds on the empath's endless giving, mistaking compassion for compliance and empathy for permission. The more the empath chases understanding, the more invisible they become in the relationship. This pursuit is not love, it's self-erasure disguised as devotion. The empath's identity begins to dissolve under the constant effort to earn affection that should never have required earning in the first place. It's a quiet form of self-abandonment that often feels like purpose, but it's really a slow drift away from the self. The moment an empath recognizes that love should never demand the destruction of one's own peace, everything begins to shift. Healing starts not when they give more, but when they finally stop. Because the truth is simple, chasing someone who lacks empathy will always lead you away from yourself. At some point, the empath begins to see that love cannot redeem what refuses to evolve. The realization is painful, almost shattering, that no matter how much compassion you offer, you cannot fill a void that thrives on emptiness. Narcissists are not searching for healing, they are searching for control. For the steady stream of validation that keeps their fragile sense of self alive, what the empath mistakes as a cry for help is in truth a mechanism of manipulation. This understanding doesn't come easily. It's often born after countless emotional withdrawals, moments when the empath feels drained, confused, and questioning their own reality. But with awareness comes clarity. The empath learns that love is not meant to be an act of rescue, it is meant to be a meeting of equals. True connection cannot exist when one person feeds on the other's emotional energy. And so the empath stops trying to fix what was never theirs to fix. They stop pouring light into a vessel that only reflects shadows. In that moment, power returns to them, quiet, grounded, and undeniable. Because healing begins the moment you stop mistaking someone's emptiness for your life's purpose. When the empath finally withdraws their words, something profound happens. The silence that follows is not absence, it's presence in its purest form. Narcissists thrive on reaction. They feed off emotional engagement, whether it's love or conflict. Every argument, every attempt to explain or prove your worth becomes another offering to their fragile ego. But when the empath stops participating in that game, the entire dynamic collapses. The noise that once kept the narcissist powerful fades, and they're left to face what they've been running from all along, themselves. Silence becomes a mirror, and mirrors terrify the narcissist. They can no longer draw energy from confusion or chaos. They're forced to confront the emptiness they've spent years projecting onto others. For the empath, that silence is liberation. It's not a weapon born of anger, but of wisdom, a boundary that speaks louder than any words could. In that stillness, the empath discovers something far greater than revenge or validation. They find peace, and in the end, that peace becomes their loudest statement, because nothing disarms manipulation faster than the quiet strength of someone who no longer needs to be understood to be free. Detachment is often misunderstood as coldness, but in truth, it is one of the highest forms of love, love directed inward. When the empath begins to detach, it isn't because they've stopped caring, it's because they've learned that care without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Detachment is not withdrawal from connection, but freedom from control. It's the conscious choice to no longer participate in dynamics that drain the spirit. In this stage, the empath begins to reclaim their emotional autonomy. They stop needing to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding them. Their focus turns inward toward growth, stillness, and self-restoration. They start to realize that peace isn't found in fixing others, but in honoring their own emotional truth. And with that, the endless questioning, why don't they love me? Why can't they see my worth? Slowly dissolves. The empath learns that true love never demands the surrender of the self. It flourishes in mutual respect, not dependency. This is where healing transforms into evolution. The empath doesn't harden, they refine. They rise above the chaos, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Because sometimes walking away isn't an act of loss, it's an act of profound self-respect. When the empath finally stops chasing, something subtle yet extraordinary begins to unfold. The energy they once poured outward turns inward, and the entire frequency of their being changes. What was once desperation becomes calm assurance. What was once yearning becomes quiet confidence. People sense this shift without understanding it. The empath no longer vibrates with the energy of seeking approval. They now radiate self-trust, and that paradoxically makes the world turn toward them. This is the magnet effect of authenticity. When a person no longer performs for love, they begin to attract it naturally. Opportunities, relationships, and peace begin to align with their inner state. The empath's energy, once consumed by trying to be seen, becomes a light that others are instinctively drawn to. It is not the kind of attention born from need, but from presence, the kind that requires nothing to sustain itself. This is the quiet reversal of power. The world begins to chase what the empath has always carried within: depth, sincerity, and truth. Because the moment you stop chasing what diminishes you, you create space for everything meant for you to finally find its way home. There comes a moment when the empath no longer identifies as the wounded one, but as the awakened one. The same sensitivity that once chained them to cycles of pain becomes the very force that sets them free. They begin to understand that empathy without discernment leads to exhaustion, but empathy with wisdom becomes power. This is the emergence of the empowered empath, someone who feels deeply but no longer loses themselves in what they feel. Their energy shifts from seeking love to embodying it. They no longer chase connections, they create them through presence and authenticity. The empathy that once attracted manipulation now inspires transformation in others. The world senses their strength, not the loud, aggressive kind, but the quiet authority of someone who knows themselves fully. And that kind of energy cannot be ignored. This is not a return to who they were before the pain, it's a rebirth into something far greater. The empath rises not in defiance, but in understanding. They've learned that real power isn't about control, it's about consciousness. Because when the empath stops chasing narcissists, they stop orbiting pain and finally become the center of their own universe.